Okay, thanks for joining us, everyone. Dr. Roblard couldn't make it to the lesson on Coriolanus last week, but he would love to say a few words about the I banish you speech. As an ex military man himself and someone familiar with the elements of the mindset that Coriolanus is expressing that still plague so many soldiers today. So I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on it. If you didn't catch the two previous lessons, you can go back and watch those. We're going to begin, as always, with our prayer. And remember, the reason we're reading these books is because, in our opinion, they touch on themes that are most neglected in schools and universities in the sadly oppressive contemporary culture of education. So let's begin. Come, Holy Spirit, divine creator, true source of light and fountain of wisdom. Pour forth your brilliance upon my dense intellect. Dissipate the darkness which covers me, that of sin and of ignorance. Grant me a penetrating mind to understand, a retentive memory, method and ease in learning, the lucidity to comprehend, and abundant grace in expressing myself. Guide the beginning of my work, direct its progress, and bring it to successful completion. This I ask through Jesus Christ, true God and true man, living and reigning with you and the Father, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
I've noticed, Mike, that people are starting to remember some of the phrases from the prayer because we repeat it every week.
Mm.
On one of the Substack articles I did, summarizing an apologetics work by the philosopher priest Paul Glenn, somebody said, I'm definitely going to pray for my dense intellect on this one.
Hmm.
So they'd got the message.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrasing of it's just so well put, and yeah,
That's
it's
it.
powerful.
Very important one. So let's begin with just giving a rundown of the whole I banish you speech. And then we're going to go through line by line, thinking about what state of mind is being expressed here and how it really sums up this conflict between the warrior spirit and then the democratic regime that he feels no longer appreciates him. But
Mm.
we also see this as a moment of weakness too, just like we were saying with Plutarch's um, life of Coriolanus, which Shakespeare is basing this on. The remark was that he never understood that when he had these outbursts like this, it was actually a moment of weakness rather than
Hmm.
strength. So
Hmm.
the speech goes like this. He's just been banished by the people because they worried that he, in running for office, basically, is going to be a tyrant. He's too dangerous, so they want him gone.
Hmm.
You common cry of curs, whose breath I hate as reek of the rotten fens, whose loves I prize as the dead carcasses of unburied men that do corrupt my air. I banish you, and here remain with your uncertainty. Let every feeble rumour shake your hearts. Your enemies, with nodding of their plumes, fan you into despair. Have the power still to banish your defenders, till at length your ignorance, which finds not till it feels, making not reservation of yourselves, still your own foes, deliver you as most abated captives to some nation that won you without blows, despising for you the city. Thus I turn my back. There is a world elsewhere. The most important speech in the play, arguably.
Mm. Yeah.
So the common cry of curs then, the people are dogs. That's what the cur means. What
Hmm.
kind of attitude is he expressing here? I've got a couple of thoughts about it. Thinking about the voice of the people
Hmm.
being reduced to a cry. What
Right.
have the
Right.
tribunes done?
Yeah. This is he's seeing this as the mob, that he has fought on behalf of and risked his life on and his men on behalf of, and now he's trying to lead them, and they're not having it, and he's not having them either. So this is the impasse that they've arrived at.
I was having a look at some older criticism of the play because most of the recent Shakespeare criticisms largely affected by woke, but there are a couple of interesting thoughts on this. It was that when he says common cry of curs, uh, it's saying that people are both a pack of dogs and also the bark of dogs.
Mhm.
So this is what Brutus had accused Coriolanus of thinking earlier, that they're of no more voice than dogs that are kept for barking. So in that sense, then, he's saying that their political voice is just like the cry of beasts.
Mhm.
When the people
Mm.
vote, it's like dogs barking. So he doesn't respect this at all. Like their
Right,
votes
right.
count for nothing. It's
Mhm.
just that they're bestial. Why should anybody listen to the voice of the people?
Mhm. Right, right, because he's coming from this aristocratic martial tradition that they're not familiar with, and that's this echoes itself in, I guess, pretty much in all returning veterans, where they start becoming um, cynical towards the civilians who they defended, or who sent them away to the particular war that they fought, and that's at least what I'm hearing here.
Right, yeah. So the cur in the sense that the people now are just mongrel dogs, and the cry is because they've been manipulated in his view by the tribunes because they were with him
Mm,
just moments before, but now it was quite
right.
easy to turn
Yeah.
them against him.
Mhm.
So it's almost like they're the attack dogs of the tribunes who manipulated the people. But it's
Mhm.
common in the sense you're hinting at there as well in being base or ignoble. So from his elitist martial view of things, who should listen to the people? What have they ever achieved?
Yeah, what rank do they have, compared to his whatever his ranks? Yeah, yeah.
That's it. So the people in his view then almost aren't even properly human, and this is an assault on the whole idea of the democratic republic.
Yeah, didn't you say that this was the only Shakespearean play to be banned during his
Only Shakespeare
lifetime?
played banned in a democracy, yeah, a modern
Right,
democracy,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
because of the view of the people. I mean, what do dogs need? Masters, right?
Right, yeah. So who's gonna go and appreciate that play, at the, you know, whatever,
Although
at
he's got an
the
interesting
theater?
insight here, which is that the they've got them already. The tribunes, Sicinius and Brutus, they know how to set the dogs on him.
Yes. Yep, yep, and he doesn't. He doesn't have that corresponding he doesn't have that in his character, nor does he have that skill set to whip them up with just mere rhetoric.
Nice, yep. Which is a form of emasculation for a man like him, isn't it? Because he's now having to fight in an arena where he's out
Mhm.
of his comfort zone.
Right. Yeah, certainly.
It just reminded me in Julius Caesar, a play which has got some similarities to this one. Uh, when he's assassinated and the people are finally free of him, the first thing they ask for is another Caesar. Like they want to be ruled. Uh,
Mm,
I wonder whether this is what he's hinting at here as well. So
right.
um, they're ignoble, they're base, they stink, and his view of them is like dogs, and who should listen to their voice? That's the opening remark. Whose breath I hate as reek of the rotten fens. So after reducing them to the level of beasts, then, and their political views are worth nothing to him, the very breath of them disgusts him.
He's not winning friends and influencing people with these lines right here.
No, definitely not. So we've got here a couple of things I wanted to bring up. Not just physical disgust, but also moral disgust too. Because he moves from this line here, which is not even being able to bear their physical presence. Their mere bodies disgust him. They seem like gross and base. But the next point he had was that their loves, too, not just their breath, but whose loves I prize as the dead carcasses of unburied men that do corrupt my air. So we've got he hates their breath because it stinks to him, but also their loves, too, are now worth nothing.
Hmm.
Physically gross and morally also contemptuous to him as well. Like, you praise me, you look up to me, you would honor me, you would love me. Well, that disgusts me too now. I don't need that from you.
Hmm. Right. Right. He's he's letting him have it at this point. Yeah. This is the gloves are fully off, and he's burning all his bridges.
But what position does this put him in then? I mean, what gave him the rank or the status of the great warrior before this fallout with the city? Wasn't it exactly this? The loves?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was. And if you go further back, it would have been some type of fighting on behalf of the demos, right? That's what gave him the authority to lead in the first place.
I wonder what's the dead carcasses. The comparison to the dead carcasses. It's the idea of mortality and the people representing the fact that decay is inevitable. You remember when at the start of the play he was introduced by Menenius just before he was given the honorary title with lots of god imagery, like he wasn't a mere man.
Mm-hmm.
Now
Right,
their
right.
lives reek like dead carcasses to him. So the people to him are just human, mortal, decaying. They're rotting all around him, but it's like he doesn't see himself as a human being.
Hmm. See, this also reminds me of the De Carrera that we read last month, where he was talking about how the military uniform and the person that wears it, or I guess any type of uniform, it is a nod to the transcendent and to things and virtues that are atemporal or that transcend the temporal moment. And yeah, the dead carcasses are an example of the opposite of that, of transientness, and I guess people that are not committed to, in his view, to atemporal transcendent ideas.
Yeah, right. I mean, the part of the soldier's role is to have a kind of contempt for death and to
Hmm.
realize that there are things worse than dying, because even stepping on the battlefield at all means that you're willing to be reduced to a dead carcass.
Mm. Yep.
Let's just, before we move on, have a look at a line from Julius Evolar's Metaphysics of War, which I think is an interesting one, because although we're going to point out the flaws with the attitude of Marcius as expressed in this speech by the end, that's not to say that he is 100% flawed. No Shakespeare hero is. There's greatness to him, which is what makes him a tragic hero in the first place.
Mm.
Greatness fallen.
Mm.
So Evola writes that what is really required to defend the West against the sudden rise of these barbaric and elemental forces is the strengthening, to an extent perhaps still unknown to Western man, of a heroic vision of life. Apart from the military technical apparatus, the world of the Westerners has at its disposal only a limp and shapeless substance, and the cult of the skin the myth of safety and of war on war, and the ideal of the long, comfortable, guaranteed democratic existence, which is preferred to the ideal of the fulfillment which can be grasped only on the frontiers between life and death, in the meeting of the essence of living with the extreme of danger. Now, I really liked his image there of the cult of the skin, because it reminds me of what Coriolanus is saying here about the dead carcasses. It's as if this is all the people really value, and he stands for something more than that.
Right. Right. Yeah. It does seem like a similar ethic being referred to there. Yeah.
Right. And if he can't integrate this ethic into what the reality of Rome is, then we've got a good formula for the tragedy there. The man that won't
Hmm.
compromise.
Yeah. 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 He's as you said last time. He's Achilles, still trying to operate in a domestic space.
Precisely. So he turns the tables, and then, having said that he finds them ignoble, base, physically disgusting, morally disgusting, says that he banishes them instead.
Mm.
Now, you had some good thoughts about how this expresses a common mindset among returning veterans, uh, even today. Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do. I mean, this is a thesis in my PhD thesis that was turned into a book, but I think a lot of it has to do with the radical civil military disconnect and the all volunteer force. So rather than having a shared citizen soldier model where you would have had a social tapestry where you saw people going away to war and you saw the felt local impact of that. Instead, because of the all volunteer force, you have a hyper specialized like Spartan class that goes away and does the war stuff, and then I would say a correspondingly domesticated civilian class that doesn't see any of or feel any of the effects of that, and that disconnect has been getting wider and wider with each generation, and it lends itself to these integration problems when you have dudes have had like 10, 10 deployments or something over 12 years coming back trying to just live normal lives. And you see this obviously through various forms in cinema. We were talking before the podcast, like Rambo 1, I think, is a great example of the Vietnam veterans' inability to fully integrate coming back into the domestic space post Vietnam. And then I would say things like Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk and what's the other one there? The Hurt Locker are probably other best examples of the Iraq Afghanistan generation trying to reintegrate back into to normal civilian life.
Yeah, and what it means for him to banish them. Earlier in the play, there was an image that he would depopulate the city and become every man himself. So, as a mere part of Rome, what he wants to do is become Rome. So, he sets the rules now. And this is because of an inability to integrate or even tolerate
Mm,
what the
right.
complex reality of life around him is. So, it
Mm,
becomes basically his way or the highway. And now he's imagining he's kicking them all out, even as he's the one leaving.
yeah. Yeah.
So he walks out with the curse then, and this is what I think is the most interesting bit of the speech. I think so far what we've seen is his disdain for them and some attempt to retain his honor, but
Mm,
to fully explain why he has that state of mind, he now outlines to them what's going to happen to them. Like, what is your fate without me? Here's why you've made the big mistake. So, and here remain with your uncertainty. This is the prediction of calamity, basically, that he thinks is going to follow. And why is that? Well, left to themselves, the people are basically consigned by their own nature to perish. They need a man like him.
Hmm.
What were your thoughts on this?
It reminded me of this New Age philosopher Ken Wilber, who I used to read, who made the comment once that the ideal pure democracy, it would be in principle a never-ending meeting, because to come to a decision would be to say that there was one view that was actually lexically better than any of the other views. So the pure democracy would be a never-ending meeting where no decision was ever made, and that just seems to me that's the hyperbolic view that he seems to be pointing out. Without his leadership, without some capacity to make some type of decision, then they're going to be left with their uncertainty, just debating and discussing with one another, while the enemies outside the gate that are more decisive are coming.
And what he knows is that um, they will uh, they will perish. So the mistake they've made is that, like you're saying, they need a leader. The pack of dogs needs a master. It's not going to be able to survive by itself. So to the extent they punish him, they also punish themselves. That's the irony he's pointing out. And we see the importance of the martial virtues to him with when he explains this threat. Let every feeble rumor shake your hearts, which is saying you're cowards. You don't have what it
Mm-hmm.
takes to defend your own city.
Yep.
So, what's the mistake they've made here then? They've seen him as too harsh or too
Mm-hmm.
overbearing, or they worry about what he could become if given power. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, he's saying, you need someone like me, because if not, what are you left with? Just a crowd of cowards.
Right. Yeah. That's it goes back to the Orwell quote about we sleep soundly because rough men stand ready at night to visit violence upon those who would do us harm. And he's that guy. He's not leaving. So they're gonna have to find, if it's not them, then it's gonna have to be the politicians that are picking up the slack for who's going to be on that wall to defend them.
That's it. So, the rumor here is the threat of violence from Ophidius or whoever else it might be. But in
Mhm,
principle, the
mhm.
point is that the city walls need to be defended with blood and iron.
There needs to be some perimeter, and there needs to be somebody on that perimeter, and that person on that perimeter needs to have a set of values that are not the same as interior to the perimeter, and that's the dialogue that they're trying to resolve right now.
Just gonna have a quick look at where else the word heart is mentioned, because I think there were a few with Ophidius earlier. I've got the phrase men of heart. Yeah, I knew that was in my mind. So,
Mhm.
right at the end of the play, when Ophidius is complaining about feeling betrayed by Ophidius, he says, at his nurse's tears, he whined and roared away your victory, that pages blushed at him, and men of heart looked wondering, each at other. So, Ophidius, in justifying to his men why he wants Marcius dead, says that he's embarrassed men of heart. So it's the same warrior ethic here that Marcius is expressing to the people. Why do your heart shake? Well, you're half men, basically. You're not up to the task.
Mhm, mhm.
And there was a bit about washing um, his hand and his heart as well earlier, right at the start of the play. Let me just check that too. Yeah, that's the same bit. So Ophidius was saying how much he hates Marcius with the one-on-one grudge match between the two generals, and he
Mm-hmm.
threatened that even if he found Marcius upon his own brother's guard, even there against the hospitable cannon, would I wash my fierce hand in his heart. So it's not a coincidence that both the generals talk in terms of heart metaphor, because I think this is about,
Mm-hmm.
what do you stand for? Integrity as a man. What are your core values? That's what the heart really symbolizes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he thinks the hearts of the people are empty.
Yeah.
So the enemies, merely with nodding of their plumes, will be able to fan you into despair, which is a great image.
Yeah. 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 That's that shows that yeah, if that can happen, then your constitution isn't too stable.
There, um, there's an image in it's the Cambridge history of which ancient civilization was it? Um, I think it's a Babylonian history, and they had the image that a a culture on its last legs is basically just waiting for a stronger one to come and cut the thread that it's hanging by, or
Mm.
because it's as in Walking Dead or empty, the smallest of winds can just blow it over. So for Marcius, the image is that once Rome has been hollowed out of the heroic tradition that men like him stand for, then just the puff, just the fanning from the plumes of the enemy soldiers' helmets will be enough to bring it down.
Right. Right. It's funny you say that. I just came across a poem today, "Waiting for the Barbarians" by C.P. Cavafy. You aware of this?
I haven't read the poem, but I know the theme of it. Have you got it there?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, but yeah, it says, "What are we waiting for? Assembled in the forum, the barbarians are due here today." And then the entire poem is about how the societies they're awaiting the barbarians to, like you said, to snip the thread of whatever is holding this semi-collapsed society together, and they're almost waiting for the page to be turned, and then it ends with, now what's going to happen was, without barbarians, those people were a kind of solution, and then it just ends. The barbarians don't come, and the society's left just in that stagnation that it was at before.
Yeah. Kenneth Clark makes a similar point in his documentary Civilization, where he talks about fear and boredom being some of the big things that destroy civilizations, along with a lack of confidence. And then he
Mm.
imagines that when the barbarians did finally come to Rome, like well, at least it was something to do, at least it was exciting, at least something was happening. So it's a
Yeah. Yeah.
similar idea.
Hmm.
So without him, then no hope. And the problem is that they fear these enemies, but they perhaps fear him even more in the short term. They worry what he
Hmm.
could turn into. They think he's a potential tyrant.
Hmm.
So that's why he, in his parting shot, says, fine, have the power still to banish your defenders. So he said that even the smallest of rumors can terrify them. And if an enemy so much as moves, then their cowardly hearts will shake. But they also have a fear of great warriors like him. They haven't got the foresight. Why can't they understand?
Mm. Yeah, that is the issue, huh? Maybe they've just grown too comfortable. You know, they're just too comfortable to think that there could ever be a threat from the outside. Maybe he's been doing too good of a job. Him and his men have been doing too good of a job at defending the perimeter. So they, in effect, him and his class are taken for granted, and they might have been too successful at what they've done.
Well, that's a big theme in lots of historians' writings about how luxury and comfort breed
Mm,
decay and decadence. But you also see it even in modern westerns as well, like The Searchers, for example, or Shane. Uh,
mhm.
at the end of the films, when all the problems are over, like what does the gunslinger do? He rides off into the sunset. People
Mhm.
don't need him anymore.
Yeah, I guess same thing too with the fall of feudal Japan and the Ronin just walking around, just absolutely lost as to what to do with themselves. Same sort of effect. But yeah, what does the warrior do once they come back and there's no use for them?
Right. Although what's interesting here, I think, and makes it especially frustrating for Marcius is that Ophidius isn't dead. We know he's there on the outskirts of Rome, still as a present threat. So he's saying, right here, rubbing it in their faces, there are
Mhm.
people prowling around the perimeter waiting for you. Can you still not see that you need somebody like
Right.
me?
Yeah.
I think that makes it even worse. And
Certainly. Yep.
the point here is, well, there's probably a parallel to that actually now, isn't there, with the way in which the traditionally masculine traits with like stoicism, competition, dominance, aggression, etc. Those are some of the things that our culture is currently denigrating most, and yet the world is becoming on its the fringes of what used to be the West, increasingly fraught with violence.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. It's not as if jihadism just went away. I mean, that is still chipping at the edges of the West, and that's not going away anytime soon either. And despite that, that has locked arms with the Rainbow Coalition. The Rainbow folks will gladly count Islam as part of their alliance, and that has nothing to do at all with that value set. And they will denigrate toxic masculinity of Christian men that come from the same metaphysical monotheistic tradition. So yeah, it's the the domestic space is not coherent, or it's not maximally coherent in any sense.
And this is why I think you get the mutual respect between the two men, because for all his disdain for the people, Marcius at least shows that it's an honor to fight Ophidius, because when he's told at the beginning, look, this is what we need you to do. We've got this uprising at Coriolanus. Ophidius is leading it. And he says, oh, yeah, we've met many times before. He is a lion I am proud to hunt.
Hmm.
So the people are common curs, just mongrel dogs, but Ophidius, he's a lion. And that combat against him is something that Marcius feels is dignified. And it's a bit like
Mm-hmm.
in the Song of Roland about the Saracen and Christian knights facing off. And the the narrator, um, although writing from a Christian perspective, he never belittles the Muslim warriors, because at least they're not fake and gay, right? So they embody things that
Hmm.
the Christian knights also embody.
Hmm.
There's, for one thing, monotheism, both in common, and they both pray, and they
Hmm.
both practice some forms of asceticism, etc.
Hmm.
They've got their
Hmm.
combat training. They're willing to die for something they value more than their own skins, as
Right.
Evola put
Yeah.
it, and they don't mind being reduced to dead carcasses on the battlefield. So there's some mutual respect there.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This is the moral equality of combatants. What makes this really what throws a monkey wrench into all this is obviously the issue of technological advancement. So as you see technological advancement get really ramped up, you can have something like the noble cavalry charge at the beginning of World War I getting completely annihilated by the needle gun, and then eventually the both sides going, you know what, all this noble, dignified horse and cavalry charge, we need to get rid of that, and we just need to play a game of technological one-upsmanship. You take that into the nuclear age, you take that now into whatever drones and cyber and autonomous, semi-autonomous weapons, if that's the landscape of the battlefield, what you know now where on earth do you situate the noble warrior who's willing to put his his life and his skin on the line to fight? I mean, he's in the way. He's what was he going to do? Send mean tweets at his enemy? I mean that's sort of where we're at right now. So the noble space of the uh, Hector versus Achilles battle, like that's long gone because of technological advancement. So I'm not sure where there is a space for noble, dignified combat anymore.
It's an old theme in military history, isn't it? Going back to at least the invention of the crossbow. That was one of the big ones where people started writing about that.
Mm.
The
Yeah, yeah.
cannon would probably be the next one. Then you've got the revolver, the machine gun. But yeah, I
Mhm.
wonder whether things like biochemical warfare, drones, etc., take it to a point where it's not just a new degree, but a difference in kind. The
Mhm.
counterpoint to that, I remember the military historian Martin von Creveld, who's written on the connection between masculinity and warfare. He wrote a letter defending the lecture I was sacked for, and one of
Mhm.
his points was that the the qualities of soldiership, etc., the virtues of the perimeter that the lecturer was mentioning. He said, "Look, push button warfare hasn't arrived yet, and may never do so, and we still close on the enemy in hand to hand combat, etc." So
Mhm.
the lecture's addressing some of these live qualities, but I take your point that we've definitely got a diminishment of it to a degree that probably hasn't ever been achieved in history before.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, yeah, I mean, even like the use of special forces or like Delta Force units, it's still precision nighttime snatch and grab, close kill operations. It's not we're going to designate a battlefield at daytime and we're going to send out our guys and you're going to send out your guys and we're going to there's going to be a whatever a cannonball shot that is sent notionally to let us know that this is going on, and then we're gonna duel or something. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that formality. It's just completely collapsed. I think largely on account of World War One is sort of where you see the last remnants of noble combat just go out the window with
Mm.
the cavalry getting chewed up by machine guns.
Yeah. Um, I wonder what the solution to this is going to be. Whether it will just be an acknowledgement that sex itself doesn't really matter to combat anymore, and there won't be any uh, movement to keep women from front lines because technology means that it doesn't make sense to do that anymore. But I can't see that happening. I still think there'll be an acknowledgement that physically men are better suited to these roles despite technology. So it will keep going much as it has done before. Um, Now, he says that the problem with them is that they don't realize any of this until it's too late. Their ignorance finds not till it feels, which is basically, you're going to be sorry. You'll realize what I'm saying here is true when it's too late, when the threat is here, but you haven't got the prudence or the foresight to realize it now. So the people just live for the moment, and at the moment, they think they're safe, and he's the danger.
Mm. Yep. Yeah, that seems to be their perception of him and what he's trying to point out.
This is your point about the lack of military training or the military virtues being downplayed in society, though, because most, perhaps all societies in history before our own have regarded this as being one of the most noble pursuits and have always been planning ahead for it. So the threat of violence is ever present. Like you said, who knows what's there on the perimeter waiting? But
Mhm.
here, when he says there's ignorance, it's as if they have forgotten that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the I don't have the historical knowledge to know what the civil military like, demographic makeup was like at the time for where he's operating it, and I'm wondering to what extent that impacts things. I mean, you could never imagine this type of speech in Sparta, for instance. That wouldn't happen, right? Because everybody is a citizen soldier. So I'm wondering once again if the division of labor between citizens and politicians and soldiers, etc., in um, Coriolanus's space is part of the ingredient as to why they're not seeing it, why they're so ignorant.
I know it was mainly the sons of the citizen farmers who made up the Roman army, and then when fertility rates fell in the late stage of the empire, long after the play is set, but the problem they had there was that they could no longer man their own army, and they had to bring in
Mm-hmm.
mercenaries from the neighboring barbarian tribes to
Right,
do it
right.
for them, and that
Mm.
was basically a bad move because you don't have your own
They have no
people defending
allegiance.
their country. They don't really care. Yeah, they got no
Y-
stake in Rome or what it means.
mm. The other issue too that just occurred to me, and this is more emblematic of the American political situation right now, is that post World War II, you would have had a Congress that was full of people that were all World War II veterans, and so their foreign policy decisions would have been intimately informed by their service experience. Now, with a like I said, post Vietnam, with an all professional force, the the apathy in the civilian demos at large is reiterated in the organs of government at the congressional level, just because you have less and less people who have served that just numerically you're not going to have that representation anymore, so they're not going to care as much about these issues.
Right. So then the Curs don't even have dogs to lead them. Sorry, the Curs don't even have masters to lead them who recognize the dangers or the importance of preparing for them. So
Exactly. Yeah, they just have a bigger brother version of them as
yeah,
their representation. Yeah.
exactly. That's it. It's really well put. So in banishing their defenders, then, like him, and leaving only themselves unbanished, they're basically left with their own worst enemy, which is their own ignorance and short sightedness and inability to prepare for the reality of the threats confronting them. So they're not just cowards, but they also lack prudence. That's what he's driving home here.
Yeah, and they've just ousted their sheepdog, and their sheepdog is now aligning with the wolves outside the gate, and
Right,
that's not a good recipe.
exactly right. Making not reservation of yourselves, still your own foes. So this is the point we were just mentioning before, where the people are their own worst enemy and they need to be led, they need to be managed. And the problem with listening to their voices is that they don't actually know what is good for them. They need someone with a firm hand to say, here's what we're doing. And he feels like he is the guy to do that. And the tribunes didn't like the
Mm,
direction he was going in, more authoritarian. And ironically, they have, in defending the people against him, just taken that place of authority. They become the manipulative elite that he was trying to excise, cut out as the poison. But then he was told,
mm,
no, you are the danger. You're the poison to the body politic, and you need to leave instead.
mm. So, covert authoritarianism, soft power authoritarianism is okay,
Yeah,
right? But not, but yeah, he just yeah.
that's exactly it, isn't it? So, although we don't like the guy with the scars and the muscles who talks to us in a mean way, he might boss us around. But really, the smooth tongued talkers of the tribunes
And the
and
and the
the
H
rest
and
of
the
them,
HR department. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's it. they're worse. So the situation he's left here then is that what will happen to them is that they won't even need to be beaten physically to be taken captive because they're already uh, broken mentally because they're so afraid of people like him that they've exiled him, that the terror will overcome them without any need for conflict. Because what kind of conflict could they put up anyway? And the idea
Mhm.
of a country, a city being taken without blows, I think is a great insight from him because when a people is truly emasculated like this, then the battle's over before anyone's even really recognized it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems like this is always the case with collapsing civilizations and empires, is that the thing that really does them in, it's a defeat, it's an internal lack of believing in what they used to believe in, and not some sort of threat from outside. Sure, there might be some barbarians at the gates that eventually are the straw that breaks the camel's back, but the real thing that often breaks a civilization, it's an internal problem.
Gibbon has some remarks in his history of Rome, and he notes that the serious and manly virtues in particular were the subject of ridicule. Um, that
Mm.
I think was very telling because it's almost as if you think there's nothing worth fighting for. Why would you even bother coming to blows?
Yeah. Yeah, this is, R.R. Reno in his essay Return of the Strong Gods I've mentioned before, talks about that the post he calls it the post-World War II consensus went from nation states believing in something to all just taking on a be easy to one another, we'll just solve everything through economics and pleasure mentality, and that's where you see both Sartre and Camus win various Nobel Prize, awards uh, for their writings. So, like a hollow, thin existentialism then becomes the new ethic in the 50s to replace faith, family, and flag.
Yeah, that's a really insightful connection. We need to remember to put the link to that Return of
Mhm.
the Strong Gods essay in the comments. I'll make sure I do that. It's a good one. People need to read it. So, total contempt then, because he despises the city on account of the people, despising for you the city. So that's why he's leaving. Rome now disgusts him because
Mm.
of the people, and he turns his back on it. So, a couple of things here that I think are worth thinking about. He says he despises not just the people, but Rome as a whole because of the people. So, since the people have power, in his view, then the city can't be noble, right? Because the people are the problem. They're just the common curs and they stink, they're rotting, etc. So, I mean, if that's what the city's all about, then what good can the city be? But the city here, he says the city, not Rome. And I wonder whether the point about the city is actually like the polis, political life,
Mm.
not just
Mhm.
Rome, but the whole
Mm.
idea of society and political organization.
Hmm.
That's what he's turning his back on, which is where the Rambo figure point comes in. Like,
Yeah.
screw this. I'm going to go live in the
Yep.
woods like a wolf.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, there's actually a documentary you can find about some Vietnam vets up in Washington State that went and did that, and they couldn't integrate it, and they were just like, we're just gonna go off and live in the woods, and they effectively did, and yeah, I can't say that there haven't been times when I haven't indulged that that fantasy. So I see what see kind of what he's getting at.
And
Um,
so this is the conflict, what he despises. It's not just this particular city. It's not just Rome. It's the idea of politics
Mm,
totally. And
yep.
why is that? Because the heroic virtues to him are necessarily in conflict with it. He feels weakened off the battlefield. There's too much compromise involved.
Mm, mm,
But the problem is that the political life is like the precondition for the hero at all. It precondition for the idea of virtue and honor and renown, etc. So that's
mm,
the dilemma that he's caught in. So he wants to
mm, mhm,
completely jettison it and go and live like in the wild. But that's not the
mhm,
kind of creature he is, because man is the rational animal, therefore the social animal. And then Aristotle says that the man who lives outside the city has to be either a god or a beast.
mm, mhm. Yep.
Now we know which one he
Yeah.
thinks he is.
Yep. Yeah. This is uh yeah, this gets back to the point that the whole thing that gave him the authority and the training to be this guy was the demos that he's now turning his back on. So if he severs that, then yeah, then he's just this atomized war agent just pinwheeling in with no social reason other than I guess to keep campaigning war
This
for
is
war's sake.
Yeah, right. Um, and this is the point I touched on when I had a go at covering the end of the play last week, which is that he becomes, according to Menenius, a kind of nothing. And he's
Mm,
described as sitting in state. They compare him to a tiger. He compares himself to a dragon. And of the two things that Aristotle says are the possibilities, either beast or god, whereas he imagines he's going to become godlike, he actually
mhm.
becomes bestial
Yeah,
instead.
yeah.
So this
Yeah, somehow
question,
he loses the plot and wants to attack the city where his family's in. I mean, yeah, that's a bit
that's it,
it's a
yeah.
bit getting your wires crossed. Yeah.
Now, when he says there's a world elsewhere, what could he possibly mean by that? Because
Mm.
is this saying that he can live a life outside a city? Because what he actually does, he goes to another city. He goes
He
to
does, yeah,
Athens.
yeah,
He
and
goes to Coriolanus.
fits
So
right back into his role as military leader. Yeah.
exactly it. So the world elsewhere then, is this the fantasy of some kind of apolitical or
Mhm.
anti-political life?
Some Hobbesian state of nature again, or I don't, yeah, I don't know. Robinson Crusoe on an island, talking to himself. Yeah, I don't know. Cabin in the woods. I'm not sure what he's getting at.
Well, Cabin in the Woods, I think, is what he uh, hints at to begin with, because he says he goes like a lonely dragon to his fen, and he's aware there of trying to live in isolation, but then decides that Ophidius is the
Mhm.
better bet.
Right. So yeah. So in the movie, he does try I forget in the play how this sorts up, but in the
In the
movie,
in
he
yeah
does try
in the
the
play,
atomized
he
man for like a couple weeks. Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's some hints at it in the play, but in the movie with Ray Fiennes in, they do show him like camping out in the middle of a lake, and that's when you get the
Mhm.
dragon imagery, etc. He grows a long beard, he looks like a
Yeah.
hobo, and then he finally
Yep.
goes to Ophidius, and then he has
Mhm.
this big moment where he has the head shaved again, the beard trimmed,
Yeah.
and then it's like
Yep.
you're integrated into a city again now.
Yep. Yeah.
So
So it didn't
the
work.
yeah, that's it. The
Yep.
hero needs to be harbored somewhere, even to be a
Mhm.
hero at all.
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
So, a couple of thoughts to finish on from another critic. This was from an essay in the 1950s. Uh, Taylor, I think that guy's last name was. He says, in
Mm.
the end, Coriolanus learns a hard lesson: you cannot fight an abstraction. The Rome you attack is made up of individuals, specifically
Mhm.
your mother, your
Yes. Yeah.
child,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
Now, when he does give in and in Aufidius's mind betrays Aufidius because he realizes, no, I can't go and march on Rome for this exact
Mhm, mhm,
reason.
mhm.
What is that a recognition of?
I'd say a recognition of his origins and recognition of the individuals and not the abstractions that he's that are going to be collateral damage in this I don't know this selfish like revenge narrative that he's trying to live out.
Yeah, I think this is the point that there isn't a world elsewhere, and he can't despise the city because of the people, because at least some of those people are his own family. So it's
Mm,
a
mhm,
recognition of connection, which he's tried to sever. He wanted to
mhm,
break all bonds to it and have this
mhm.
fantasy of himself as the lonely dragon or whatever it might be. But
Yep.
then humility, just in time, makes him realize the error of that.
Mhm, mhm. Yep.
And yet, too late to satisfy Ophidius. And we've got the comment from the critic as well that the man who will never compromise, that's Marcius, suffers, where a lesser man, Ophidius, does survive. Now, what do we
Mhm.
think about this idea of Ophidius being the lesser man, but the last man standing?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure is the tacit claim here that you're a lesser man if you compromise on anything, and that the ideal man is uncompromising? Is that what he's saying?
It looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah. So the idea that Marcius is the more heroic of the two, according to some kind of idealized vision, and then Ophidius is able to tone that down a bit. He's more realistic.
Mhm. Right, right.
He doesn't search for
I'm
the world elsewhere. He knows the gritty reality of politics.
right, right, yeah. I'm just thinking in terms of just Aristotelian mean, that it's a vice to have an excess of rashness or boldness. It's not just pedal on the floor all the time. There needs to be recognition for when you've overshot, and that's not virtue. It's not virtuous to be in excess and uncompromising on everything.
Right. That's why I thought it was an interesting quotation because what makes Marcius the tragic hero he is the many flaws that he has. And some of them
Mhm.
are pointed out by Plutarch in the source material. So rash, choleric in temper, too proud,
Mm, mm.
etc., won't
Yeah,
compromise.
yeah.
And it seems to me that he's not really the greater man of the two. He might have elements of the heroic code to a greater degree than Ophidius does, but the fact that he
Mhm.
can't marshal them, the fact that he loses his temper, means that in a way he brings about his own downfall because he can't
Yeah,
adjust to the reality of life around him.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I disagree with that phrasing that there. I don't know if Ophidius is necessarily the lesser man just because he knows that there is a time and a place to compromise, and not everything is war all the time.
It's a bit like the Achilles and Hector
Mhm,
pairing in the Iliad because a superficial reading of that poem might lead you to think that Achilles is the hero, but he has many of the same faults as Marcius does. Hence
mhm,
the
mhm.
idea of Achilles in Rome, whereas
Yep,
Hector, although he dies, whereas Ophidius doesn't, uh, Hector is really the one who embodies masculinity rather than just the machismo of Achilles, who shows himself up as the petulant child by desecrating Hector's body.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, precisely.
All right, that was really good to talk through that speech with you. I'm glad we did a third session on the play
Yeah,
because
same here. Yeah,
it was important to do that, especially using your insights from your own combat experience. So, next time we're looking at books 11 and 12 of The City of God from St. Augustine. So, you can get those online, everybody, and going through those would be useful. We've got a couple of questions just quickly. Is Coriolanus an anarchist. I think he thinks the people represent the threat of anarchy and disorder in Rome, and he would want to be the authoritarian strong arm that rules them. I don't think he likes the idea of poor discipline. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. I think he wants uh, official authority to have order on things, and yes, it seems like a not an anarchical sentiment.
Yeah, I think so. I think for him, democracy itself represents a kind of anarchy because of the fact that it's just the common cry of curs.
Right, right.
And Yosef says, it's interesting how you mention anger, but isn't anger a good emotion if controlled? Isn't it a representation of fire? Yeah, in itself, like all the other passions, anger isn't bad. It's just a prompt to get us to do things. The point we're making is that Marcius uh, loses his temper. He isn't a meek man. He can't make sure it's the right amount at the right time in the right way, etc. So, in other words, he can snap, which is what
Mhm.
Plutarch points out in the source material of the play, that it's the moments when he loses his temper and on the surface of it seems most heroic and masculine. It never occurred to him that that's when he was actually least so. And then we've got one more. This one's for you, Mike. How's the hand?
Thanks. It's recovering nicely. It's going to be a fourth metacarpal break that I got when I was wrestling, and it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks of inactivity, and it's annoying to say the least. But you know, plenty of time to work on other aspects of fitness. So you know, presents an interesting puzzle.
4 to 6 weeks. Not too bad. But I guess you can't write though, yeah? You can't type.
I'm left-handed and I hunt and peck anyways, so it's it's I've gone to super slow to very super slow, so it doesn't matter much.
um, we need to link the Return of the Strong Gods and also your recent essay for Am Greatness as well, because you
Yes,
touched on
yeah,
some of these themes in that as well. So
that'd be perfect. Yeah,
if I forget, guys, in the comments, make sure you tell me. I'll add it in on the video in a second. It'll go up after we finish this. All right. Thanks for joining us. Mike, thanks as always. And I'll see you guys next
thank you.
week looking at St. Augustine, City of God, Book 11. Make sure you guys read it beforehand. All right. Take care.
Take care, everyone.